For most of human history, we told the story of the wild as a story about kings. The biggest horns, the loudest roar, the male standing alone on the ridge while the sun goes down behind him. It is, without question, a good story. It has sold books, filled screens, and shaped the way generations of us picture the natural world. It is just not, in most cases, the true one. Walk into almost any stable animal society on this planet, a pride, a herd, a clan, a troop, a pod, and pull back the curtain on who actually keeps it running, year after year, drought after drought, generation after generation, and you will find something surprisingly consistent. It is rarely the male with the mane, the tusks, or the roar. It is the mothers, the sisters, the grandmothers, the females who never left, who never got to leave, and who built, out of sheer necessity, the systems that let everyone else survive long enough to reproduce. This is a film about power, not the loud kind, the kind that does not need an audience, does not need a performance, and does not evaporate the moment a rival shows up with a bigger set of horns. It is the kind of power measured in decades rather than seasons, in memory, in coordination, in biology itself. Over the next 50 minutes, we are going to travel across an entire continent's worth of ecosystems, dry season waterholes, flooding rivers, frozen highlands, open grassland, and meet 9 species where the real architecture of survival was built, quietly, by females. We will ask, again and again, what does it actually take to hold a bloodline together? Not for one lucky season, but across half a century of drought, disease, and everything else this landscape can throw at a family. Let's begin where the story usually starts wrong, with a pride of lions, and the male everyone assumes is running it. Sunlight hammers down on a shrinking waterhole. The dry season here has ground on for weeks, and every marsh nearby has cracked into dust. Around this one remaining pool, the ground itself tells a story. A half-buried skull, deep claw marks scored into dried mud, vultures perched in the skeletal branches above. Something has made this waterhole a very dangerous place to drink from. It is not, as the old narrative would have it, a single dominant male. It is 6 lionesses, moving shoulder to shoulder out of the grass, eyes sweeping the water's edge the way a security detail scans a room. The herds drinking here scatter to one side. There are no males with this group. None are needed. This is, and has been for generations, their territory. The lion has been a symbol of kingship for so long that we forgot to ask a basic question. Who is actually still standing when the king is gone? Because he does not stay. A young male lion is expelled from his birth pride somewhere between 2 and 3 years of age, pushed out by the very females who raised him, the moment his mane begins to show. From that point forward, he is a wanderer, searching the savannah for a pride he can take by force. If he is strong and fortunate, he succeeds. If he is not, isolation on this landscape is close to a death sentence. A lone male has none of the advantages a coalition or a pride provides. Even the males who do succeed do not get to enjoy it for long. An average reign lasts only a couple of years before a younger, hungrier coalition arrives to challenge him. He is driven out or killed, and the cycle starts again with a new face wearing the same crown. Meanwhile, on that same stretch of territory, the females never leave. They are born there, they raise their cubs there, and they die there. The only truly permanent residents of a kingdom that changes kings, on a schedule measured in a handful of years. The female bloodline is the one constant across every single reign. Males come and go, like the wet season giving way to the dry. The lionesses are the pride's actual continuity. It is not just about who stays, it is about who does the work. The vast majority of kills in a pride are made by coordinated groups of lionesses working together, using position, patience, and timing to bring down animals that dwarf them individually. A full-grown Cape buffalo, for instance, can weigh close to a ton, and no single lion, male or female, is bringing one down alone. It takes a coordinated ambush, several lionesses converging from different angles, each one trusting the others to hold their position. When the kill finally goes down, tradition, not necessity, not physical superiority, is what sends the resident male in to take the first mouthful. Without the hunting skill of the females, the so-called king of the pride would simply starve. There is a piece of lion biology that almost never makes it into the popular telling of the story. Control over reproduction itself belongs to the females, not the males. During estrus, a lioness may mate dozens of times over the course of a single day, a strategy that increases the odds of successful ovulation, and one that also happens to give her enormous influence over whose genetic line actually continues. She decides when it begins, when it ends, and if a male does not measure up to what she needs from him, she is capable of driving him away entirely. Researchers studying pride dynamics have documented something remarkable. A pride can effectively force out an unreliable or underperforming male, purely through collective withdrawal, refusing to hunt alongside him, refusing to share a kill with him, refusing to mate with him. No violence, no confrontation, just a slow, deliberate freeze-out until he has no reason left to stay. And then there is the part of lion society that looks less like a monarchy and more like a mutual aid system. Inside a pride, nursing is communal. Any lactating female will nurse any cub that needs it, regardless of whose it biologically is. Her sister's cubs, her cousin's cubs, cubs she is not related to at all. Biologists refer to this as allo-nursing, and its function is straightforward and, honestly, kind of beautiful. If a mother is killed on a hunt, her cubs do not starve. They are simply absorbed into the pride's shared milk supply and raised by her sisters, aunts, and cousins as if they were their own. No cub is abandoned to that fate. The bloodline does not break because one individual was lost. It is ensured, collectively, by everyone else. The male may wear the visible symbol of dominance, the mane, the roar, that can carry for miles on almost no energy thanks to the unique, flattened shape of a big cat's vocal folds. But the pride survives because the females built redundancy into the system itself. No single loss, not even the loss of a mother, is allowed to be fatal to the whole. It is worth pausing on that roar for a moment, because it is one of the more misunderstood signals on this entire landscape. Most mammals produce sound through triangular vocal folds. Lions, along with the other members of the genus Panthera, have flat, square-shaped folds instead, which allows the tissue to vibrate with far greater intensity while using remarkably little lung pressure to do it. The result is one of the loudest sounds in the natural world, produced for a fraction of the energetic cost you would expect. Males use that roar constantly to advertise territory and warn off rival coalitions before a physical confrontation ever becomes necessary, which means that even the lion's single most iconic behavior is, in practice, a cost-saving measure, a way of avoiding a fight rather than winning one. It is a loud, theatrical signal sitting on top of a social structure that, underneath, runs almost entirely on the quieter, less visible labor of the females holding it together. That idea, that the group outlasts any individual member, including its most visible one, is going to resurface again and again as we move through this film. For now, though, we leave the grass entirely and head toward the water, where a different kind of female power is on full display. Not strength, not numbers, but memory. This is the Mara River during crossing season, and it is one of the most dangerous few hundred meters of open water on the entire continent. Nile crocodiles, longer than a small car, lie motionless along the riverbed, patient in a way almost nothing else in this ecosystem can afford to be. The current shifts from year to year, silently redrawing which sections of the crossing are safe and which are not. And every single migration season, hundreds of thousands of animals arrive at this bank and have to answer one question before a single hoof touches the water. Is this the place to cross, or is it not? For a herd of elephants, that decision does not belong to the strongest individual present. It belongs to the oldest. Meet the matriarch, typically the oldest female in an elephant family unit, sometimes approaching 50 years old, and carrying, by weight, the largest brain of any land animal alive today. A significant share of that brain's mass is devoted to the hippocampus, the seat of long-term memory in mammals, and hers has had half a century to fill up. She remembers where water still ran during a drought that happened before most of the herd around her was even born. She remembers exactly which crossing point on this river claimed a calf several dry seasons ago, and she has never used it since. She remembers the safe paths through acacia woodland that this family has not walked in years, simply because there was no need to. None of this runs through a map or a satellite signal. It runs entirely through accumulated, lived experience, passed down not through direct instruction, but through the simple, repeated act of the herd following her, year after year, crossing after crossing, for the length of her entire life. Elephants also read the ground itself. Their feet are sensitive enough to detect vibration carried through soil, the footfalls of a distant herd, the shift of an underground current, the impact of waves against a rocky bank miles away. The matriarch draws on all of it at once: memory, vibration, scent, and sightline, testing the bank with one deliberate foot, feeling for depth, for firmness, for the angle of the slope beneath the mud. And then, in a moment, she makes the call. Not here, further upstream. No one in the herd argues. No one hesitates. Over the length of her life, she has been right often enough, and consequentially enough, that the survival of every individual behind her now runs on the strength of her judgment alone. This is a fundamentally different model of power than the one the lionesses use. It is not physical dominance, and it is not built on a hunting economy. It is the slow, compounding value of simply not dying for 50 years, and then sharing everything that taught you with the family depending on you. It is knowledge as inheritance. And that is precisely why losing a matriarch, to poaching, to age, to any of the dozen ways this landscape can end a life, is such a profound loss for an elephant family, far beyond the loss of one individual. It is the loss of an entire archive of survival knowledge that has no backup copy anywhere else in the herd. A younger female may eventually step into the matriarch's role, but she does so with a fraction of the accumulated experience her predecessor carried, and the herd's margin for error narrows accordingly. This is the quiet, unglamorous tragedy sitting underneath a lot of elephant conservation work. A population count on a spreadsheet can look perfectly stable, while the actual social architecture holding that population together, the knowledge, the learned safe routes, the memory of which years were dangerous and why, is disappearing one matriarch at a time, invisibly, without ever showing up in the numbers. The rest of the herd's biology exists largely in service of the same collective, family-centered survival strategy the matriarch presides over. An elephant's oversized ears, threaded with a dense network of blood vessels, function as a natural radiator, cooling the animal's blood as it fans them in the heat of the day. A built-in climate control system that the whole family relies on to keep moving through the hottest hours, rather than resting through them. The trunk, meanwhile, containing an estimated 150,000 individual muscle fascicles across roughly 17 major muscle groups, is versatile enough to snap a large branch and delicate enough to pick up a single seed, and it is put to constant, careful use in feeding the calves, clustered protectively at the center of any moving herd. That protectiveness runs deeper than simple instinct. Elephants have been observed returning to the remains of deceased herd members, sometimes years afterward, and gently touching the bones with their trunks, in what many researchers describe as a form of mourning behavior. One of the clearer pieces of evidence that an elephant family's bonds extend well beyond simple utility, into something that looks, from the outside, remarkably like grief. It is one more thread in the same pattern. This is a species whose survival strategy was never only physical. It was built on memory, relationship, and the accumulated experience of females who had the years, and the standing, to earn it. From a species where female power runs almost entirely through memory, we travel now to one where it runs through something considerably stranger: hormones, anatomy, and a birth process unlike anything else in the mammal kingdom. Of every species in this film, the spotted hyena breaks the most rules, and it starts before birth. In nearly every mammal species on Earth, males carry higher circulating testosterone than females. Spotted hyenas invert that pattern almost entirely. Female hyena fetuses are exposed to unusually high levels of androgens, male typical hormones, while still developing in the womb, and it reshapes them, physically, in ways ordinary mammalian biology rarely allows. Adult female spotted hyenas develop what researchers call a pseudopenis, a dramatically elongated clitoris that closely mirrors the structure of the male's actual phallus. Females mate through this structure, urinate through it, and, this is the part of hyena biology that carries a genuinely steep cost, give birth through it as well. The birth canal this anatomy creates is narrow, only around an inch across, for cubs that can already weigh several pounds at the moment of birth. It is, in blunt terms, a dangerous system for both mother and offspring. A meaningful percentage of first-time hyena mothers do not survive the process due to catastrophic tissue damage, and cub mortality during birth itself is high, with many firstborn cubs failing to make it through the narrow passage at all. It would be easy to read all of that as simply a design flaw evolution never bothered to correct. But look at what this anatomy actually buys the species in return: near total female control over reproduction. Every single cub that does survive this birth canal exists specifically because its mother's body allowed it to. Not because of a male's size, not because of male-on-male competition, not because of forced access. It is about as close to complete reproductive gatekeeping as any mammal on the planet has evolved, and the social order built on top of that biology reflects it completely. Spotted hyena clans, which can number well over 80 individuals, run on a strict matrilineal hierarchy. Every adult female outranks every adult male in the clan, without exception, including males considerably larger than she is. Rank is not earned through combat the way it might be in many other social carnivores. It is inherited directly through the maternal line, passed from mother to daughter. A male hyena, no matter how physically imposing, must defer to females across the board, and remarkably, that deference extends even to female cubs still months old. A fully grown adult male will yield space, food, and priority to a juvenile female purely because of the rank her mother occupies. Status here is written into the body and the bloodline before an individual has done anything at all to earn or lose it. Hyena clans are also, contrary to their scavenger reputation, some of the most sophisticated cooperative hunters on the savannah. They coordinate through vocalization, through scent marking, through a shared understanding of territory that gets defended collectively against rival clans, lions, and anything else that threatens it. Their bite force is immense enough to crush bone that most other predators simply have to abandon, which means very little of a kill goes to waste once a hyena clan claims it. Cub rearing inside a clan reflects the same matriarchal logic running through everything else in hyena society. Cubs are raised in communal dens, and a mother's rank directly determines her cubs' access to food, standing, and protection from the moment of birth. A high-ranking female's cubs will outcompete the offspring of lower-ranking clan members almost by default, simply by virtue of the social position they were born into. Rank, in other words, is not something a hyena earns over a lifetime. It is something she inherits the instant she is born, and it shapes essentially every interaction she will have with the rest of the clan from that point forward. 3 species into this film, and already we have seen 3 completely different operating systems for female authority. Coordinated labor and reproductive control in the lion pride, accumulated memory across an elephant matriarch's lifetime, and now, in the hyena, power written directly into hormones and anatomy before an individual is even born. Next, we leave the group entirely, for 2 predators who rule not through family or clan, but through going it completely alone. Not every female in this story leads a group. Some hold power entirely alone, and they pay for that independence in a different currency altogether: exhaustion. The mother leopard hunts alone. She raises her cubs alone. She defends every single kill alone, against larger, group-living predators that would happily take a carcass from her without a moment's hesitation. A leopard is capable of bringing down prey that weighs twice her own body mass, even, on occasion, an adult wildebeest. But the killing itself is only the first half of the job. Getting that carcass up into the branches of a tree, out of reach of lions and hyenas patrolling below, is the harder task, and it has to happen quickly. Before the scent of a fresh kill draws in competitors she has no chance of fighting off. Not every night ends in success. Some nights she returns to her den with nothing at all. Other nights she makes the kill only to lose it to a hyena before she has managed to hoist it out of reach. Each of those failures means less food reaching cubs that are, at that very moment, waiting alone and unprotected wherever she has hidden them. There is no partner sharing that risk, no pride to fall back on, no safety net beyond her own skill and her own vigilance, night after night, for as long as those cubs need her. Out on the open, shadeless grassland, a different solitary predator runs an entirely different playbook: pure, uncompromising speed. The cheetah can accelerate from a dead standstill to well over 100 kilometers per hour in a matter of seconds, a body sculpted by tens of millions of years of evolutionary pressure toward one singular purpose. Every curve of the spine, every fast twitch muscle fiber, every semi-retractable claw exists to serve velocity, and almost nothing else. But specializing this completely comes at a cost. A cheetah's body trades away raw strength and size for speed, which means a female cheetah has no coalition, no pride, and no fixed territory to defend or retreat into when things go wrong. What she does have, uniquely among Africa's large carnivores, is freedom from any fixed breeding season. Female cheetahs are capable of coming into estrus and conceiving at essentially any point in the year, regardless of season, rainfall, or latitude. A genuine outlier compared to most of the other predators sharing her ecosystem. When she is ready to breed, she advertises it through scent markers left in her urine, drawing in a male or a small coalition of males from considerable distances. Once mating concludes, the male or males simply leave. There is no lingering, no shared parental investment, no protection offered afterward. From that point forward, she is raising her cubs entirely alone, in an ecosystem stocked with predators that outweigh and outnumber her at every turn. Lions and hyenas will take a cheetah's kill from her without a fight, and, given the chance, will take her cubs as well. Her power, if that is even the right word for it, is total autonomy, bound to no pride, no permanent territory, no male, and no season. It is a form of freedom the leopard shares in her own way too. But on this landscape, independence of that kind is never free. It is purchased, continuously, with solitude and risk that a social predator simply does not carry alone. Both of these solitary hunters share one more trait worth noting: an almost obsessive investment in secrecy. A mother leopard will regularly relocate her cubs between den sites, sometimes every few days, specifically to avoid letting any single location become familiar to a passing predator. A cheetah mother does much the same, favoring low hills, thickets, or the base of scattered trees. and rarely returning to the same resting spot twice in a row. Neither species can afford a fixed address. For a lioness, or a wild dog, or a hyena, home is a defended territory held collectively. For the leopard and the cheetah, home is wherever the cubs happen to be hidden today, and staying alive means treating every location as temporary. Now, for a species that takes almost everything we have covered so far and turns it completely upside down. Meet the topi, and prepare to set aside most of the assumptions we have built up over the last half hour, because this species runs its mating system in reverse of nearly everything else on this savanna. A female topi has, biologically, only about 24 hours each year, during which she is capable of conceiving. One day. No second chance if it is missed. That single, narrow biological window reorganizes this species' entire social structure around it, in a way that would have genuinely surprised even Charles Darwin had he documented it firsthand. In most lek-breeding species across the animal kingdom, males compete aggressively for the best display territories, and females simply choose among the winners. Topi flip that pattern almost entirely. Here, it is the females who fight for access to the most desirable males, headbutting, shoving, and physically driving rival females away from the center of the lek, where the most sought-after males hold their ground. And once a female has secured her position, she may go on to mate with several different males within that same single fertile day, a strategy that appears to maximize genetic diversity in whatever offspring results. The males are locked into their own separate arms race, simply to hold on to their spot. Research out of the University of Liverpool documented something remarkable. Some males will sound entirely false predator alarm calls when there is no actual threat anywhere nearby. The goal has nothing to do with protecting the herd. It is a stalling tactic. A false alarm causes a female to pause and grow cautious, delaying her departure toward a rival's territory just long enough to tip a tight breeding contest in the calling male's favor. It is deception deployed purely as a mating strategy, and it only works because, for this one species, on this one narrow day each year, the females are unambiguously the ones setting the terms of the contest. Every species covered in this film so far has bent the concept of power in its own direction. There is one model left to explore though, one that runs not on hierarchy, not on memory, and not on hormones, but on something that looks, almost comically, like a vote. The African wild dog is, pound for pound, one of the most effective hunters on the entire continent, succeeding on the vast majority of its attempts where lions and leopards often fail, and it runs one of the most cooperative societies found anywhere in the animal kingdom. Breeding rights here are concentrated almost entirely in a single dominant female, the alpha of the pack. Her presence actually suppresses fertility in the other adult females around her, a physiological effect that converts what could have been reproductive rivals into devoted allies instead. The result is a pack of 10, 15, sometimes 20 adult dogs, all investing their energy and risk into raising a single litter of pups that, biologically, belongs to just one female. Before every hunt, the pack performs an elaborate greeting ritual researchers refer to as a rally, tails wagging, muzzles licking, bodies leaping and bounding, the air filled with excited vocalizations. In 2017, a study published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B uncovered something genuinely surprising buried inside that ritual. African wild dogs appear to vote on whether to launch a hunt using sneezes as their ballots. Each sneeze signals a vote in favor of moving out, and once the tally crosses a certain threshold, the pack commits and departs together. It is not, however, a flat or purely egalitarian democracy. When a dominant individual initiates the rally, it takes noticeably fewer sneezes to reach the threshold for a hunt than when a subordinate pack member starts it. Influence still counts, but the underlying mechanism remains a remarkably collective one for a large, cooperative carnivore. A genuine group decision, rather than a single dominant animal simply dictating when the pack moves. Once the pack does launch, the majority of their hunts succeed, largely through coordination and sheer endurance, rather than brute individual strength. After a kill, adults return to the den and regurgitate food for pups and for any pack members who were unable to join the chase that day. The injured, the very young, the ones left behind to guard the den. Some individuals will run considerable distances on a full stomach purely to deliver food back to those waiting. And the hierarchy of who eats first here runs in direct reverse of what most people would expect from a competitive carnivore. Pups eat before adults. The next generation is fed ahead of the strongest, most capable individuals in the group. And that single ordering principle is arguably the real secret behind the wild dog's success as a species. This is not a system built around the survival of the fittest individual. It is built, deliberately, around the survival of the whole pack. 3,000 meters above sea level, in the Ethiopian highlands, the wind cuts differently than it does on the plains below. Mist crawls across sheer cliff faces, and night temperatures can plunge close to freezing even this close to the equator. This is the domain of the gelada, the world's only primarily grass-grazing primate, and the setting for one of the most intricate primate social structures ever documented by researchers. From a distance, a gelada band looks entirely male-led. The dominant male is an imposing figure, with long canines and a golden mane draped across his shoulders like a cape. But physical dominance here tells only part of the story, and arguably the less important part. The true foundation of gelada society rests with its females, who bond through generations of maternal kinship. Grandmothers, mothers, daughters, and granddaughters, forming alliances that last a lifetime and outlast any single male's tenure. Males, by contrast, arrive from outside the unit entirely, and they retain their leadership position for only as long as the resident females continue to accept them. Every gelada carries a distinctive patch of bare, reddish skin on its chest, roughly heart-shaped. In males, the vividness of that patch's color reflects physiological condition and competitive standing in real time. A healthy, high-status male displays a striking, saturated crimson. As he ages, or as his standing erodes, that signal visibly fades, and the females notice. They are the ones who decide who grooms with whom, who is permitted to sit nearby, and, ultimately, who earns continued access to mating. When their collective support for a male erodes, his grip on leadership begins to slip almost immediately, regardless of how physically capable he remains. Eventually, a younger, more ambitious challenger arrives. Winning a physical confrontation with the incumbent male, though, is not enough on its own to secure lasting leadership of the unit. The new male still has to individually build trust with each female through social interaction that can take days or even weeks to develop. In gelada society, fangs and physical strength may win a male his opportunity at leadership, but it is the female's pre-existing web of alliances that ultimately determines how long that leadership actually lasts. At the opposite end of the spectrum from the gelada's alliance politics sits a much smaller, much quieter species, where female power rests not on control, but on trust, the bat-eared fox. This is a small fox with dramatically oversized ears, proportionally enormous enough to resemble satellite dishes mounted on the head of a house cat. Those ears are a genuine biological superweapon, capable of detecting sounds most other creatures cannot perceive at all. Dung beetle larvae moving beneath the soil, termites tunneling just centimeters underground. The female bat-eared fox functions as the primary hunter for her family unit, sweeping the ground each night with those radar-like ears, locating prey purely by sound before a single visual cue is available. After giving birth, the female continues leaving the den regularly to hunt, rebuilding the energy reserves that pregnancy and nursing have drained from her body. Meanwhile, the male takes on the greater share of pup-rearing duty, not as an occasional helper, but as the primary caretaker for a significant portion of each day, guarding, warming, and watching over the litter while the female is away providing for the entire family. In the bat-eared fox, female power is not built on dominance, hierarchy, or reproductive control at all. It is built on trust. Trust that when she leaves the den each night, the male will hold up his end of an arrangement neither of them can maintain alone. It is one of the rarer forms of power documented in the natural world. Not coercion, but a functioning partnership, built on faith between two individuals raising the next generation together. Not every form of intelligence-driven survival in this ecosystem belongs to a single dominant matriarch. Sometimes it belongs to an entire troop working in concert, using intelligence itself as the primary defense. Baboon troops are highly social, living in large, complex family groups where every member has a functional role, and where alliances and social standing matter as much as raw physical strength. Baboons are also remarkably capable natural strategists, forming defensive partnerships with entirely different species for mutual benefit. On the open savanna, baboon troops are frequently found moving alongside herds of impala, and the pairing is not incidental. The impala's hearing and sense of smell far exceed the baboons, capable of detecting the scent of an approaching predator from considerable distance. The baboon, meanwhile, has excellent vision from an elevated vantage point in nearby trees and rocks. Together, the two species form a layered detection system with very few blind spots, and predators hunting near a mixed group of baboons and impala see their success rates drop substantially compared to hunting either species alone. Baboon vision itself deserves particular attention here. Baboons possess trichromatic color vision, similar in structure to human vision, which allows them to pick out camouflaged predators against foliage far more effectively than many other prey species can. A leopard's rosette-patterned coat, expertly evolved to blend into dappled light and broken shadow, is largely defeated by a baboon's color vision from an elevated branch. This single sensory advantage regularly turns what should have been a successful ambush into a wasted effort for the predator involved. This combination, social cooperation, cross-species alliance building, and sharp sensory intelligence, makes baboon troops some of the most resilient and adaptable social units anywhere on the savannah, even without a single dominant matriarch directing every decision. Their survival strategy is collective in the fullest sense, intelligence distributed across dozens of watchful individuals, rather than concentrated in one. We leave the grasslands entirely now and travel to the cold Pacific waters off the coast of the northwestern United States and Canada, to meet a species where the argument for female-led power is, arguably, the strongest and best documented of any animal on this list: the orca, or killer whale. Resident orca pods are organized around matrilines, multi-generational family units built around a single lead female and her descendants, sometimes spanning 4 generations swimming together at once. Unlike almost every other mammal studied by biologists, female orcas undergo menopause, ceasing reproduction, while still living for decades afterward. In most of the animal kingdom, this makes very little evolutionary sense on its face. Why would natural selection favor a body that stops reproducing decades before it stops living? The answer researchers have converged on is precisely the theme running through this entire film: knowledge. A post-reproductive female orca, freed from the demands of pregnancy and nursing, becomes the pod's primary decision-maker, particularly during years when food is scarce. Long-term field studies tracking individual identifiable orcas over multiple decades have found that pods are considerably more likely to survive lean salmon years when they are led by an older, post-reproductive female, one who has personally lived through previous scarcity and remembers exactly where to find fish when the usual grounds run empty. Her sons, in particular, stay close to her for their entire lives, and her presence measurably improves their survival odds even into adulthood, long after they are capable of hunting independently. This is memory functioning as an evolutionary strategy, in almost the same way it does for the elephant matriarch, but taken a step further. An orca grandmother's value to her family only grows once she stops reproducing, because it frees her entirely to do the one thing only she, among the pod, has had the time to become truly expert at: knowing exactly where the food is, and passing that knowledge down verbally and behaviorally to daughters, granddaughters, and grandsons who would otherwise have to learn it the much harder way, through trial, error, and hunger. Killer whale pods also hunt cooperatively, in coordinated patterns distinct to each family group and often passed down culturally rather than instinctively. Different pods, even living in the same waters, can specialize in entirely different prey and entirely different hunting techniques. Techniques that appear to be taught rather than simply inherited through instinct. That cultural transmission runs, again and again, through the matriline. Remove the oldest female from a pod, and you do not just lose one whale. You lose the primary keeper and teacher of that family's accumulated hunting culture. Precisely the same quiet catastrophe we described earlier when discussing the loss of an elephant matriarch, playing out now in an entirely different ocean, in an entirely different order of animal. 10 species. 10 completely different systems for holding a group, or a bloodline, or a single mother and her offspring, together against a landscape, or an ocean, that offers absolutely no guarantees. The lioness rules through coordinated labor and reproductive control. The elephant matriarch rules through memory, accumulated patiently over half a century. The spotted hyena rules through a biology that hands her authority before she is even born. The leopard and the cheetah rule through radical independence, purchased continuously at the price of total solitude. The topi inverts the entire structure of competition for one single day each year. The African wild dog builds something remarkably close to a democracy, run on a mechanism as small and strange as a sneeze. The gelada's leadership rests on webs of female alliance that outlast any individual male's tenure. The bat-eared fox runs on nothing more complicated, or more difficult, than trust between two partners. The baboon troop survives through distributed intelligence and cross-species cooperation, rather than a single figure at the top. And the orca grandmother, freed by menopause from the demands of reproduction, becomes the single most valuable member of her entire pod, precisely because she has stopped having young of her own. What ties every one of these systems together is not raw strength, and it is not dominance pursued for its own sake. It is continuity, the unglamorous, largely unphotographed work of making sure the next generation survives long enough to inherit whatever the last generation learned. That work rarely produces a dramatic silhouette against a sunset. It does not roar. It mostly happens quietly, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, while nothing appears to be happening at all. But it is, in nearly every system explored across this film, the thing actually holding the whole structure together, season after season, well beyond the tenure of any single dominant male passing briefly through. Conservation, when you look at it through this lens, is not only a matter of keeping a number on a population count from reaching zero. It is about protecting the invisible architecture sitting underneath that number entirely, a matriarch's 50 years of accumulated memory, a pride's coordinated hunting knowledge passed down through generations of lionesses, a network of female alliances built over years that cannot simply be replaced once broken. Lose the individuals carrying that knowledge, and the population can survive on paper for years, while the actual social fabric holding it together quietly unravels. Because across every one of these species, survival was never just a matter of genes passed forward. It was always, also, a matter of what got passed down alongside them: memory, cooperation, alliance, trust, and who was still standing, patiently, to pass it on. Thank you for spending this time with us. There are countless more stories like these playing out on the plains at this very moment, and we will be back with more of them soon.